Hello, I'm Hallie Madeline, and welcome to the Happy Humans podcast. By listening to this podcast, you'll get to dive deep into the beautiful messiness of life with us and explore what it feels like to honor the ebbs and flows. We'll be interviewing inspiring humans about their growth journeys, as well as solo casts from me, all exploring the idea of showing up for ourselves so that we can show up for the world. When we're on the path of self-growth, our intention is creating deeper connections with ourselves and the world around us. So this podcast is all about building a community around genuine, vulnerable connection with humans who are embodying their authentic selves and honoring their journey as we collectively center on the intention to create more healing and compassion in the world. We get real about our relationships with ourselves and alchemizing lessons as we honor the power of our stories and the unique beauty in all of us. Self-care starts within, but it doesn't end within, because when each of us connects to our own unique purpose here as a human, the world becomes a more compassionate, magical place. The Happy Humans podcast is both produced by and sponsored by Free Energy Collective. My path as a photographer and creative director over the past 4 years has led me to founding the Free Energy Collective. It's a full-service media agency focused on authentic content creation. So we focus on telling inspiring stories through videos and photos, serving both brands and humans who are creating a better world. Creativity has the power to change the world, and anyone can create content, but it's really the energy behind the collaboration that truly allows the unique magic of you and your brand to shine through. It really shows in content when people feel valued and are enjoying themselves, so Free Energy Collective believes in creating connected relationships with our clients and connecting on a human level as creators. Play and fun are just as important as focusing on high-quality work and connected communication. Life is meant to be enjoyed and magic is meant to be created, so every photo and video shoot blends playful fun and powerful storytelling together to capture your unique energy. Free Energy Collective collaborates with human and brand clients who believe in a better world and who center their intentions around it. The energy channeled by co-creating magic together is what generates a positive experience for everyone involved. So the content might not be free, but the energy always is. That's the power of the collective. Hi everybody, we're here today with my amazing friend and amazing human, Kevin Wong, and he's the owner of Habitual Roots, which is an incredible business based here in Denver and North Carolina. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here and to share and connect with you.
Always. So do you want to share a little bit with everyone about who you are, what you're up to right now, and just all the amazing things you're doing?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, today's world is definitely an interesting time. So if you're tuning in, I'm sure there's a lot of emotions and things that the society is going through. And so again, thank you so much for joining Hallie and I today. It's going to be a really great conversation and just sharing about what has led us to be in this moment, for me to be able to share and connect with you and talk a little bit about my past to this present. So essentially, I know you and I connected briefly through some acquaintances, and from there, our relationship evolved around sharing about past traumas and past experiences and moments with our family and our friends, and we start to delve into the understanding of how we shaped our personality, right? And my own exploration of my personality, or my hero's journey towards understanding what my family has done for me, my friends have done for me, and the experiences I've kind of chosen, or kind of maybe not chosen, right? Because based on all these different things, it's led us to making certain decisions based on something else.
Right.
So diving into learning about the habits is what really was the journey that started it all for me today. And so I'm from North Carolina, as Hallie kind of mentioned, the original location for Habitual Roots. North Carolina is my home for sure. I was born there as the oldest of 2 younger sisters. My parents essentially came and migrated when they were young teenagers as well. So a lot of my childhood was being raised by my other family members or other older siblings as mine as well too. So cousins and stuff like that. And so it was all driven around working very hard and being there to create this life that society and the United States has kind of gifted us as a view or a aim for, right? The white picket fence and having this model of family that we should live for. And so my youngest kind of memories was really around running around this little restaurant that my parents worked at and kind of helped facilitate. And so a lot of times for us, I was kind of emotionally abandoned. And so this sense of abandonment kind of trickled into what I received as love. And again, my parents and my family did everything they could to give me the life that they have given me and also this experience today. And I'm so grateful and so fortunate. But looking back emotionally, I correlated abandonment to love, which is not a healthy thing.
Right.
And so it kind of showed up in one of my youngest parts of my life. And so progressively, I worked through different emotions and I started reflecting abandonment as well, doing things to make myself abandoned by other people, right? So gifting myself with these lessons and these experiences that then shaped me into going towards my teenage years and choosing certain friends that were what I needed, but realistically, it was not necessarily the best environment sometimes. Right. Sorry if your family and you're hearing this, but I consumed.
I always think about that.
Yeah, right. But being very open and honest and sharing with you guys and sharing with you, I consumed plant medicine very early on as a child, and it opened up doors for me that I was able to broaden my awareness towards myself, but then connections with other people and connections with the community.
And when you say plant medicine, which areas of that were you diving into at that age?
Yeah, so I consumed cannabis at 13. I also consumed other narcotics a little bit younger than that as well too. So, right. But it was nothing extreme. It was just friends going to the mall and kind of laughing at what the concept of the mall was and how much stuff there is in this world, right? And so, but to keep it kind of simple, we just kind of explored ourselves in a community essence, which was younger part of my age. And so realistically, these lessons then evolved me into going into finding more deeper connections, more intimately and all that stuff too. And so, which led me to finding relationships with other partners and connecting about all the subconscious traumas in that state, right? Where you find actual love. But ultimately that led to like beautiful journeys of experiences, and I won't go in it too much, but if it's something that you're more interested in, because I definitely want to talk about what's going on more today. But through the experience of journeys, learning that I realized that we are our own bartender, serving ourselves an emotional cocktail constantly, feeling what we need to feel. We learned that we can actually drive the habits to feel certain emotions throughout the day. And so instead of realizing that there's a pandemic going on or a war on community and unity, that we can remember that our internal world doesn't know any of that. Our subconscious brain doesn't know time or space. Right? We can go into the past of emotions and bookmarks, right? Like this past trauma or this past joy was like bookmarked in our memory, but it doesn't exist, but only in a chemical standpoint, right? It allows us to refer to.
And like our subconscious is like our programmed brain almost, like based on like our experiences, and like we have the power to shape that, right?
Yeah, in some ways. And I know we've kind of briefly experienced it together, breathwork, which is one of those hugest parts. And I've been exploring a little bit more about breathwork lately, and what air actually is and what breath could really be for us. But at least where we can relate to is that everyone who's watching this and also here right now is that the breath is the first thing we all had to learn, right? Traumatically a little bit and almost not taught by anyone, but when you realize that the breath is truly the first thing that we had to experience.
Yeah. So at what phase of your journey, I guess, did you, because I feel like when we experience trauma or just wounds or anything, any programming growing up, it takes a while to realize that programming is in us or that we're operating from that standpoint. So I guess at what point in your journey did you start to become aware of the abandonment wound or just aware of your ability to connect to that part of yourself, your subconscious?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think really in the journey of reconnecting with myself, I used to be super overweight, over 240 pounds, and been through a whole transformation, right? Went through engineering school and went down that path, and tried to be that and tried to live up to the standard of what the United States and the education system kind of wants us to, right? And it's just one path. There's so many paths in this country as well, but, you know, thinking that that was what was intended for me, and then going into it, feeling into it, and then losing myself through that experience and journey made me realize that I needed to shift my entire reality by first reconnecting with who I am, right? And I guess to understand more of who I was, I had to dive deeper into these past traumas, these bookmarks, and these states of awareness that are still embedded in me, right? And those programs that run subconsciously, right? Because the subconscious is like 90 to 95% of how we experience life without us even thinking about it, because it's communicating through emotions, which is the first way we used to communicate, which is to ourselves. So how do I feel? Oh, I feel this way right now, or I feel this way right now. But then the second gesture is like the movements, as you can see, right? Before we could use words. And so learning to go back to the basis and the basics of our root, of the breath, about expression, about emotion and movement is the core fundamentals of living happily.
Like diving like way back into the root of everything. Like I didn't even, like now that you're saying this, I'm like, why don't we like give birth with like doulas like breathing as the like baby's coming out, or like I don't even know, like those are the first things, and we're unable to communicate with words for so long, and like connecting to those emotions, and like we're so trained by, like you said, there's no like right path or there's no like wrong path or anything. And I know people who are totally fulfilled like doing engineering or having the white picket fence or whatever, but just those like external like definitions of success that like make us think that like that's where we'll find fulfillment. And then I feel like so many people like reach that like blocking point where they're like, why am I not feeling this? Like, why am I not feeling fulfilled and happy? And that's when you like have to take it like all the way back to the root inside of you. And so do you want to dive a little bit, because I know you help a lot of people through that process of like connecting with themselves and just sharing tools with people that have like helped you in your personal journey. And do you want to dive a little bit deeper into what those tools are and tell us a little bit more about your journey with breathwork and all of that?
Sure. Yeah. And to tell the truth, I mean, I'm also human too. So like those physical external means of success was a thing at one point in my life, right? Where we wanted this home or this lifestyle.
Totally.
And but it's like you have to experience the great depths of both. You have to experience this one side for you to be able to appreciate the other side.
And that's not like not at all it is. Like one, we can't have like one without the other almost. Like we're all like equally spiritual, divine, and equally human, and like we need to like participate in like both sides of that, I feel like. But it's when we get like disconnected from one of those sides and think that like this one thing is like all that there is, I feel like is where the disconnection takes place. But we're all humans.
And like to reconnect it too, it's like find that balance for yourself, so then you don't show up to someone or a person who's going through their own journey too, and you're like, oh, you know? But being present and being compassionate of saying like, hey, I see you and I appreciate where you're at in your life, and just continue to honor them in the way that they want to be communicated to, whether it's family or friends, learning what is best and what they need. So
100%. So do you want to dive a little bit deeper into kind of how you show up in those situations and your relationships and the tools that you have brought to your community, like through all of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a combination of where I've kind of evolved to today, and it's continuously evolving. So to highlight a little bit about Habitual Roots, it's an organization, but it's focused more about community. It's focused on providing resources and practices for people to create mental resilience and a sense of inner peace, right? And in those contexts, we've developed different ways of creating that, because there's not one path, there's not one journey, there's not one solution to everything, right? And we know that. And so the thing that we've allowed Habitual Roots to facilitate is experiences for the community or personally, right? So say if you want to go into the community and connect with other human beings that are also going through their journey, then we do community events around yoga and sound healing and sensory walks in nature, and going back to the fundamentals, right? Slowing down and actually noticing colors, right? And noticing the objects we're looking at, right? We get so sucked into our screens and our phones that we forget, what color is your phone?
For real.
Right? And what shape is your phone, right? And where else can you see that shape in nature, right? So like going back to these core fundamental things of like noticing and appreciating the simple, small things. And in a personal standpoint, we take it a little bit deeper. We actually correlate some of the things that we've learned in engineering school. So we correlate the left and right brain mentality and balance it out with meditation and breath work. So we bring in quantum physics, we bring in neuroscience, and we bring in the basis of these things to understand how does that shape into my habits, right? Because the majority of our lives are habits, right? From the way we go to work, the way we get dressed, the way we wake up to bed, to going to bed. It's all a habit, right? And so if I ask, like, what are the things that you do most every day, right? And are you actually enjoying them? And so we've developed essentially a 5-phase methodology. So habitual roots is the entity, roots is the 5-step process. So R is learning to reset. So learning about the subconscious mind, the conscious mind, learning about the habits that have formed. A lot of the common ones that we realize and we connect with is people who are stuck in a job that they hate, right? Somebody is working something that they don't really find passion in. And it's okay that they're in that state. But the first step is awareness and wanting to make a change. But when you dive into this habit cycle, which is usually a cue that causes a behavior that then causes a reward, 3 very simple steps that people get stuck into, right? So 2 examples I would give. One, say someone's bored at work. And you're bored at work, and so your behavior is to go find something to snack on, right? You find in your break room, or you find something in your desk, and you're like, oh, I'm going to munch on something. And now you've rewarded yourself for being bored, right? And so now you're in this cycle of like consuming very high sugars. Now you're not bored, your appetite's satisfied, and now you're like, every time I'm bored, I'm in this cycle, right? Instead, now then you can realize, okay, instead of consuming something, maybe I can go for a walk. Maybe I can change my behavior. But the beauty is that you don't have to change any of those particularly. You can change the cue, you can change the reward, and you can change the behavior. So a huge one, for instance, is when people are stuck in that job, right? If you're stuck in this job, maybe this could be you. And so if you're this, then I apologize, but I love you.
And we've all been there.
Yes,
like,
firsthand. And so, for instance, if we are in this job that we're not necessarily passionate about, a lot of times when we go into that, we go and complain, right? Our behavior is to go vent and go share to somebody like, oh my God, Susan was like this at our work. Like, right. And then our behavior is to release these chemicals of serotonin and oxytocin and just feeling these happy chemicals of like, oh, I just let that out of my body. I was able to share this. And now I'm going back to my job that I hate because then I can go vent. And then I can feel these emotions again because I vented. And it's subconscious, right? You're like in this cycle of like, oh, am I actually happy, right? And so then in this situation, maybe changing the cue. Maybe your environment needs to change, right? Maybe your actual job needs to change. So then you're out of that cycle. So learning those things and resetting that, so then you can organize. So reset to organize. Organize is where you set your plan for 1 year or 3 years and creating the logistics and the actual accountabilities to really receive and achieve those goals, right? So then you have a clearer picture of where you are at and where you want to go, okay? And that's a huge level of understanding with yourself and having the integrity with yourself. So then once you organize, you go into overcome. Overcome is identifying those traumas and those limiting blocks, the fears, and really setting them in front of you and saying, hey, these are things that I'm afraid of. And it's okay that I'm afraid of them. And then overcoming them by assessing where did they come from? Was it from my family? Was it from relationships? And honoring them through accepting them instead of brushing them under the rug or just saying, oh, it's okay. Like I can just send positive emotions to my body, right? Because if you do that, you're still blanketing over it. It's still going to be there.
Right, exactly. Right?
So once you overcome, you step into transform, which is definitely one of my favorite phases, right? Because then it's asking, okay, if you are trying to achieve this, who do you need to be to receive it? Because you don't achieve it and then become it. You have to become it and then achieve it. Right? So transforming into the greatest version of you, the most fullest expression of you, the most authentic version of you. Because that's the most sustainable way of living, right? And so as simple as saying, hey, I'm going to choose to show up this way instead of letting the world with its own emotions choosing me to be like a thermometer, I'm going to be a thermostat, right? So learning to transform and step up into the version of you, learning how to walk and how to breathe, and not necessarily changing, but realizing that if you're going to live your fullest expression or the greatest legend of you, how do you need to show up today? Right? How are you going to stand? How are you going to walk? How are you going to smile? Right?
Yes.
So,
Is
and
that
the last,
the yes?
yes. So after it's reset, organize, overcome, transform, it is smile. So yeah, super simple, just learning the magnifications and the power of happiness and gratitude.
Right. That's amazing. Like as you're like going through those steps, I was like this is a natural human thing to do, but I was just like connecting it to like my journey and like the place. I was like, that's what I did. Like I was like, that's what I did, because I was like reflecting that I was like used to be in that job and I used to like be venting like all the time. And I mean, I think there's certain situations where, like you said, you can change any like part of that like you can also like change your approach maybe, and maybe it is a job you want to have, and I don't want to discredit that, but for me, I needed to leave that job, and then like that's when everything like started, and then I had to get to the phase of like actually like identifying the obstacles I had to overcome, and just all of those. That's such like a logical order to things, and I feel like that's applicable to like basically anything you want to transform in your life. I feel like that's almost like a repetitive cycle that we're like constantly going through of like all of those steps that you just listed out. Like, do you feel that way? That it's like not like you're ever just like, check, boom, I'm done, I'm rooted for life? Or do you feel like you're like repeating that cycle in different areas of your life?
Absolutely. Constantly going back through my own roots and constantly
Right.
reconnecting so I can deepen my awareness, not only for myself, but then for other people, so I can show up more fully, right? Because if I'm going and working through things, then I can't really be present with people, because I have all these thoughts and these things that I'm working through, right? And learning how this practice, right, the breath that we again bring into this whole 5 steps is the integration piece, right? So as you're learning all these modalities and these like experiences and these experiments in our society and history, it's like, okay, then how can I take where I want to go into my actual physical being? How can I actually transform?
Right.
And that's where the meditations, the movements, the breath works actually incorporate this new way of showing up, right? Because as his body, as we just talked about, communicates first through emotion. So learning the subconscious emotion communication of how do I feel now, right? And how do I want to feel today? And then how do I want to feel tomorrow? And then how do I want to express that to people, right? This gesture itself is me showing that this is how I'm giving, right? But we have all these different gestures that people have that communicate a similar thing. But everyone has their own movement that communicates it, right? So the movement allows you to then allow the emotion and then the thought to move through the body to actually incorporate it into the neurological system. So then it becomes a kind of neurological wired way of showing up, right? And what you share and what you speak and the way you stand and all those gestures. But the breath is the most fascinating because it creates more space. So from one thought to the next, the breath creates the space. So
I love that. And I love that it's I love that you acknowledge the combination of like left brain, right brain, because like at the end of the day, I feel like when I first started the self-growth journey, so we both went to engineering school, so like that like logical part of me was like doing all this research of like how do I transform my life and all these steps, and like it was just like looking at the like logical process of it. But then I feel like it took me a while to like reach that point where I was like, oh, but I have to actually feel those things. Like you can like say or like read this word that like means something, but then we have to like attach that feeling to that word or to that goal or to that desire in order to like actually embody that. And tying it all back to what you said about how our subconscious is like 90 whatever % of our operating life, and we're operating on these habits. Like I feel like those emotions and that like last step of tying that like roots process together of the like smile and the gratitude and like actually embodying that of like, okay, if I want to like reach these goals, who do I need to become to like actually get there? And I feel like that's the step that's the most powerful, that allows us to actually like embody that and actually like more deeply connect with our environment and reshape our entire lives once we can like feel that inside of us, regardless of our external circumstances. And I also think it's important to acknowledge that like everyone, like there's different starting points for all of this, and that like we all kind of get like thrust into this human world with like unexpected circumstances, and we're all born into, I guess, whatever circumstances that we're meant to. And there's so many different levels to like trauma, and that it goes like the way that the world is built inflicts like trauma on like certain people more than others, and it just like goes that much deeper. And I feel like the process is always the same, but like the starting point is different, and that just becomes like even more deep and even more powerful on the like depths of the trauma, when then you can like still take that and still go inside and still be like, no, like I know I deserve more than this, and I know I deserve better than this, and I can see that like what I'm capable of creating, like despite what the external circumstances are, despite those being like so valid and so real. And I'm just trying to be more aware and like compassionate of just like where everyone's at in the world in that process, I guess.
Yeah, compassion is the root for sure, but it's like learning to embody certain states of awareness for your operating system, right? Our operating system has certain emotions that we almost feel every single day.
Right.
We literally almost feel the exact same things every single day. And so then the question is, what are you feeling, right? And what are you running in your system? Because again, if you're running, say like if I had us all just take a moment and just feel love for a moment and taking that deep breath, and like whether it feels like the warmest hug you've ever had, it's like that is a way of embodying the word to the emotion, right? And the actual sensations and the feeling that we can have. And so like, you know, one of the most, I guess, common things right now that became popular and is developed into its own thing is like manifestation, right? People are like, oh my gosh, like I can manifest this. And the way I do that is by seeing myself do it and associate how I feel to it. But the biggest thing is, how can we let go of the physical and choose the emotion now, right? Because the biggest thing that we've now realized is that the subconscious mind doesn't know what time is. It doesn't know what this place is. It doesn't know what this room is, right? What it does know is how we feel.
Right.
So it doesn't know what the pandemic is going on. It doesn't know what our society is going through, but it knows how you feel about it, right? And then we're correlated in our communication and how we express our emotion. So then when you realize that our bodies are constantly feeling all these states of awareness and these emotions, then it's like, okay, then how can I bring it back to how I really want to feel? And if you're saying your goal of having this home or this lifestyle gives you a sense of peace or a sense of safety or security, right? Then the question is, and the practice is, how can you feel that now?
Right.
So you can tell your subconscious that you're worthy and that you're receiving it now. Right? And we can go into the scientific side of things and what it's doing to the actual inner world and the actual body within you and the emotional body. But then the recognizing piece, to recognize how important it is to understand that you're already living it if you choose it. Right? And then letting go of what that physical manifestation looks like. And surrender to say, hey, I'm already in alignment to my future because I'm feeling it now. And everything that comes along my way, beautiful connections, beautiful humans, amazing opportunities, yes, great. If it doesn't look that way, yes, great. It's still in alignment if I choose my emotion first. And it's very similar to like a radio, right? If I choose this radio station and I know it's hip hop or rock or, you know, jazz, then it's going to be a similar vibration. It's not going to play, if I choose jazz, it's not going to play R&B, right? Or if I choose R&B, it's not going to play jazz, right? But I chose it first. Instead of making me switch a radio station because the song isn't what I want to hear.
Right.
Or the moment isn't what I want.
Right. Yeah, I think that's so valid, and it's been crazy, like, on my own personal journey with manifestation. I want to start by making a disclaimer, because the last podcast episode we talked about the privilege of manifestation and how there are certain like unfortunate barriers in the physical world that, like, if I'm a white blonde girl and I'm like, I'm gonna manifest concert tickets, like it's gonna somehow, I guess, like my privilege with that is gonna like allow me to have like easier access for that, unfortunately, in the current like circumstances of the physical world, which we're all capable of changing. And I have so much faith in the people that are doing this work to like actually acknowledge these things and actually move forward to vibrate at a frequency of love. And like, I know that we can like collectively manifest that together, especially like all these, I love the old people that listen to my podcast too, but all the young people that I am surrounded by constantly in my community that are doing the meditation work and the work around love. Like, I know we're capable of like creating a new reality. And I guess just using the privilege of manifestation for good and for that vibration of love. And speaking to like the validity of manifestation as well as the privilege of it, like in my own life when I was like struggling with mental illness and was like not a clear channel at all, and like that super low point of like just not waking up to like the power within myself to create my life and design my life. Like once I started placing intention around it, like for sure everything shifted around me. And once we started focusing on this new home that we're in, like once you like put the energy out there, like then it is more aligned. And I do believe that anyone is capable of creating anything, and it all starts with our thoughts. So I guess that's just a somewhat unprocessed thought that I've been thinking about recently, like in my own life, is like trying to be like aware of like the balance between the two of privilege behind that word, but also like the validity of that process and how we can use it for good. And you're doing exactly that, of like meeting people where they're at in their traumas or in their wherever they're at in their journey, and taking them through this process that it works, and it's like so valid. And I think it's so cool just like how many lives you've been able to help like through this process, and just all the love that you're spreading to the world of like providing, this is what the world needs right now, is like these spaces to like just connect with like ourselves and our community and nature. And I guess just like thank you for doing that and for hosting these like yoga events, and they're so amazing if you're in Denver, North Carolina. But yeah, at the end of the day, like we can't grow like without that space for connection. So thank you for holding that space for connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about the integration. So I know you were able to experience it, and so thank you for being there too. Yeah. Integration is really huge, because it's like, even from this conversation, we're gonna take away something from it, we're gonna learn from it. But integration is the most important part, because it's about taking one thing and another thing and making it whole, right? Making it one, and so you can show up now as this new version, right? And as we realize, like, with the whole disclaimer and just the understanding of what manifestation can be and how it's built around, like, there's a part of it that, we don't really know if we chose to have this life. We don't really know if we chose to have our name, right? But at the same time, we chose certain pieces in a way, based on conditionings and everything that built up to it. And then from there, it's like, then we're also manifesting based on our emotions, right? And all those predestined emotions before. So it's like learning to like almost move back into the compassionate state, to be like, I see this person that is also in this state that may be more privileged or less privileged, and honoring them and seeing them for who they are, and less so moving into a state of judgment or opposite. Right. And there's nothing against it, but it's taking a moment to like understand, like, oh, I am judging. Like, as simple as looking at your garden and being like, hey, that's a weed. And that's a flower. Oh wow, I've now altered my perception of seeing something for what it just is, and telling it that it's something else, right? Same thing as like when we're sitting in a park and all of a sudden a fly lands on my hand. What is my natural instinct, right? And maybe we felt that for a moment and our body was like, oh, brush, right? But then if a butterfly landed on my hand, I'd be like, oh my god, oh, like, what is that, true, right? And so it's like learning to understand those emotions of like, oh, I'm actually choosing something lesser than the other. And it's okay to do that, but being aware of it is the first step to letting it go. Right. Because one of the greatest forms of intelligence is to observe without evaluation, just like being there. But it's a balance too, like, you can't just like sit there and be like, wow, this is all great. Like,
yeah. I feel like that's such a human thing too, is like that like judgment and emotional participation in our environment, I guess, of like, I feel like attachment is like something that happens in so many humans and like in so many situations, and yeah, getting attached to the way we feel about things or our perception of a fly or like anything. I don't know, like it's crazy that we like, the human tendencies are like so common to like observe and judge and like make evaluations on things, and I think to a certain degree like our environment has taught us that. But yeah, then just like bringing it back to like, oh, do I actually feel this way? And like, oh, what do I actually think? What actually is this in front of me? And taking that space too. Like, I love that you say like the breath is like the space between thoughts, and it really is, of like just creating that space between the like observation and the evaluation, I guess, and is the evaluation even necessary, or what am I evaluating, and just being present with our own thoughts and just being like, what am I thinking and why am I thinking this way, and I guess just reprogramming those like habits that we operate on an everyday basis.
Yeah, and again, bring it back to today's world too, right? The whole judgment piece and how we can take moments to like breathe and slow it, the pace of our own thoughts, right? Because again, in more space, you can choose to discern whether you want to act on that or respond or react from that thought.
Right.
Because again, from me being from the South, a lot of my pre-written thoughts about certain things culturally was just culture to me. And so learning to rewrite those things, like relationships to connections and community, what does that actually look like in today's world? And especially what's going on right now, it's like learning how can we honor that we have ancestral lines from our family, and nothing against them, it was just what was going on in that time, right? And honoring those and not necessarily being upset at someone because they have these preconceived notions, right? The first thing is when you accept and see that, hey, there is this problem, okay. Then the second step is to say, hey, I'm the one that's seeing this problem, right? Okay, then the third step is to say, hey, this problem is a part of me. So instead of saying that this person or this community or this essence or this society has a problem, how can I look within myself and going in myself and feeling into it and saying, okay, what is really going on here to allow me to see and observe this part of the world, right? And the breath is a conduit for it. The breath is the conduit to observe, to say, hey, I am not my thoughts. I'm just the observer and the witness to them. And the breath itself, I mean, we don't even really know that there's air around us, but it is, right? The only time we feel air is when there's wind blowing. And it's like the waves of our own ocean, right? And so it brings into account, like, and I want to go into this because I want to hear your thoughts too. But I also want to make sure that we're addressing what today's world is going through. So I'm going to share where I want us to go in a moment with how I don't know if fish know they're in water because they breathe water. They breathe and bring in through their gills and convert it to oxygen for themselves. So do they know that they're in water just like we know we're in air, right? And the same essence of it being in our equilibrium, right? And the only times they feel it is currents and waves, just like our winds, right? So I want to go there because there's a level of not knowing where consciousness actually lives. They don't know where consciousness lives. It doesn't live in our heart. It doesn't live in our brain. They don't know. Scientifically, there's no sign. So there's a lot of theories behind it living in our breath. And so pranayama and So, but before we go into that, I do want to cap off and address, like, with what's going on in today's society, I want to hear your thoughts. Like, what do you think about how we can slow down our judgments and our ways to like jump to like reacting and perceiving somebody as apart from ourselves?
I mean, I feel like it's fucking 2020 and there's like just so much being revealed and it's a lot. Like, we're going through a global awakening right now, and it's just one thing after another, like, being revealed and being like shown up, and it's a lot. So first of all, if you're a human in 2020, you're crushing it, because we're all going through our own like personal journeys while experiencing like this like world journey, and it's like so deep, and I think that is the most important thing that we can do, is like slow down and pause in the moments where it feels like we can't, which I feel like is this year. Like, I feel like we're being told what we should be doing, or like what a good person should be doing during this time, or jumping like really quickly, I guess, like on like, I want to be really careful with all of this, but like the bandwagon of belief of like what the actions we should be taking, or what's right, what's wrong, and like all this stuff. And like, I don't want to like talk about politics, or like, I don't know, it gets so messy, but like, just there's like, everyone believes that they're doing the best thing, or like that and everyone is doing the best that they can with what they know. And I think the best thing that we can do, is just if we pause and if we slow down and bring it back to like, especially with all this stuff going on, there's so many different opinions, there's so many different like perspectives. And I think at the end of the day, like we need space to connect with ourselves and to be like, what do I believe? Like, what do I feel? Like, what connects to my soul's purpose? And like, okay, if I've digested all this information, and if I've heard all these different opinions, and I think the line to be careful not to cross here is like, if people are like actively doing things to like harm other people, I feel like that's like a clear observation. But at the end of the day, being like, what is my soul purpose? What am I here to do? If I've digested all this information, how can I integrate that into my gifts? And like, what can I create to visualize the world that I want us all to live in? And what can I create to like help us get there? And how can I show up from a place of love and connection with myself so that I can hold space for whoever needs it, or, you know, just be present with where everyone is at in their journey, because I know every single human on this planet is like experiencing so much right now. So yeah, I think that's the best thing that like all of us can do, and like by ourselves, but also together. Like we need like community and connection like more than ever, and in whatever form that looks like for you right now. I know there's multiple levels to connection that people are open to right now, but yeah, I think that's the best thing we can do is pause, because that gives us the space to like, if we're caught up in our habits and like the cycles we're living in every day and the emotions, we don't have that space to like connect to our higher self and like surrender to like the process, and understanding that there is a bigger picture in all this, and that sometimes things need to be messy and crumble and break apart so that we can like pave a new way that is more like accepting and inclusive and loving and magical and magnetic and equal opportunities for everyone and creative. And that's the world that I want to see, and I know that we can't get there without pausing to connect with ourselves first, because it like all starts within, and then we take it like and share it with the world around us. Once we can cultivate that overflowing love and connection within, like then that spills over into the world around us, and we can't do that without space and pausing. So I guess that's my answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone is doing their best, absolutely, and there is no right or wrong. And when we choose, again, right or wrong, and then we're moving back into that judgment piece, right? And so it's learning to, again, not see it from black and white, but honestly looking at it from a grander scale of accepting that everyone's choosing the right thing for them, right? And when we ask or tell people to make a decision, you know, whether it is following a certain path or a certain bandwagon per se, it's more about honoring what is right for them, right? Mm-hmm. Some people want to stay inside, some people want to go out, mm-hmm. some people want to connect this way, some people want to stand up this way, mm-hmm. and it's okay. Everyone is doing everything that isn't like right for them,
right? And
honoring that and being compassionate of saying, hey, like, and the biggest part is communication, mm-hmm. right? If someone's asking you like, well, why aren't you doing this? Mm-hmm. Why aren't you doing that? You know, mm-hmm. the question is, well, what are you doing this for? Right? Yeah. What makes you excited to do that? And when they answer that, then it's like, okay, well, this is what makes me feel that way, right? Yeah. And it doesn't have to look the same way. Mm-hmm. I honor you and I can communicate and I'm here for you, but choosing what's right for you, because the moment we like go out of ease or an alignment for ourselves, then we're putting our state and our immune system in jeopardy.
Right.
Because now we're like doing something that's uncomfortable, like, you know, and sometimes you can go through it and you can learn and feel some emotions that our world's going through right now. But at the end of the day, like, if you're out of alignment, your immune system is out of alignment.
Right.
And then you're more susceptible to who knows what.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think, again, it is a touchy subject, and again, thank you for being here to listen and to ask and share some of the things that you perceive too. But yeah, it's great.
It's a powerful time, and like I think that's where like the polarity or the divisiveness, that word has been so overused recently, but like all of that is coming from is that we all feel very strongly about like whatever like opinions that we have or whatever beliefs we have or whatever actions we're taking. And communication. I've always had this dream since being a little kid that I had this like weird reoccurring dream as a kid that like anytime I was in like a threatening situation or like something bad was happening, that I would like be able to solve it with communication. And like, I don't know if that was just some like childhood fantasy, or I don't know if the world's too delusional to be open to that at this point, but I don't know. Like it can only help. Like bettering our communication skills as a species, as humans, as like conscious beings that on a soul level are here to fulfill some karma within us. Like the best we can do to like meet each other where we're at and to come to solutions and to work together is communication, and like bettering those skills and improving those skills and being aware how we're communicating to ourselves first, and then bringing that from a loving perspective to how we communicate with others. And yeah, that lack of like immediate judgment on something and just being open to asking. And 2 podcast episodes ago, we were talking with my friend Joe, and he was saying like we have to be open to like talking with people without like trying to change their mind, or like just being like, oh, like why don't you tell me like a few things about why you believe the things you do, and then why don't I tell you a few things about why I believe the way I do, and having those like discussions that aren't like, and being open to having like different viewpoints on things and trying to understand why people have those viewpoints rather than immediately being like, no, like screw you, like I'm right, you're wrong, and it's that polarity that we get into a lot of the time. But it's hard, and there's like things going on in the world that are like affecting people's lives, and there's been like corruption in the world for so long, but as long as there's darkness, there's going to be light, and we're just growing like stronger and stronger in the humans that are doing good for the world. And I keep bringing it back to that, just to like hope, and just to like seeing the light in the world and seeing the good in the world, and like all of the amazing things that so many humans are doing to like push this world forward into like a more evolved state, and contributing to the healing of the world, which you are, and a lot of our community is, of like healing ourselves so that we can heal the world, so that we can show up in those ways. And yeah, nothing but hope for the future. So that's where I'm at with the world.
Yeah. Just here.
A lot.
We're just here, and we're just enjoying a lot of what's coming up for people. You know, it's a lot of emotions for everybody. But again, we have to honor them, you know, and allow ourselves to create the space for people to share them as well. Because if we want to be understood, we have to understand them.
Right.
And taking into account to understand them before we try to make ourselves understood.
Right. Right. I love that. Yeah, we're all humans, and like we're all in this together. More love. More love,
Yeah.
more love, more love.
Yes, and sometimes people will ask, like, how can we do that? Yes, you can say that humans and we're here together, but how do we actually shift our awareness to seeing that we're all collectively on this flying ball of a spaceship, you know, together, experiencing a beautiful human journey. Like, the human experience is delicious, feels good, it looks good, it sounds good, like all these different amazing sensory experiences here for us.
Yeah.
Right? And it comes back to like, how can I slow myself down? How can I create the space? How can I create more space here and more here, so I can allow more love to show up in my life, and for more love to show up for myself before I try to give it to someone else.
Right.
Right? And they say it on airlines with like the air mask. Right?
Oh.
Yeah. Put your air mask on first before you put on.
Yeah. Right.
Because if you can't breathe, how can you help someone else breathe?
Right. Yeah, that's so true. I know. I feel like on like a soul level, like some people might believe this, some people might not, but my personal belief is that like we have lived many lives, our soul is eternal, and that on a certain level, like this like earthly human experience is like weird as fuck, and it's like messy, and it's like complex, and like we're like complex beings, and like our consciousness and our ability to like observe our own thoughts, and like I guess we don't know if other species can do that or not, and we can come back to your fish analogy too, but like I mean, I just feel like on some soul level, like our souls chose this human experience to like go even deeper, to like dive deeper and like be present in these like karmic lessons and experiences that like, yes, the human experience is like so divine and like happy and joyful and wonderful, and like we can all think back to those feelings that we've felt in our lives, and we've just felt like ecstatic and just like lit up and just so fulfilled and like, oh my God, like is life always like this? But then I think every person watching and present can also think back to like moments where they're like, why do I feel this way? And like it all feels so heavy, and like how do I move forward? And this just like crazy span of emotions that like humans have. And I guess it's not crazy, it's like what we're here for, but like it's that like balance and that duality and like being present with like all of it that like makes us these like human beings. And I think on like a soul divine level, we are light. Like we all have the ability to like connect to that like divine, the God and goddess in like all of us, like we were talking about the other day. But just we all have the ability to like connect to that part of ourselves and to embody that and to observe our thoughts at any point. But I just think it's so cool that all of our souls are here for a reason, and that all of us are choosing this human experience. Like that's like a bold move, like to everyone's soul who chose this, like that's courageous, and that's incredible that like that we're here for that reason and to experience those things. And taking it back to like, how can I, in this human experience on this planet, in this lifetime where I'm just living in this human body called Hallie, how can I make life enjoyable for myself? How can I like create a life that I like want to live? How can I create the space to love myself, to connect to myself, to my thoughts, so that I can like share those with the world and just become an even more like clear channel for being present with that. And I think it's just this constant evolution of like shedding and growing and connecting like more and more to our higher self and to our purpose. And I feel like that's, in this state and time, that's what I believe like the purpose of life is, to like see the God in ourselves so that we can see the God in like every human around us. But yeah. So do you want to dive more into your analogy with the fish and the water?
Yeah.
And I mean, just what consciousness even is and where it comes from?
Definitely. Beautiful transition. So good. Yeah, consciousness is so fascinating, right? Because we have this ability to be aware in all these different things, right? Because you can still take your awareness to your past and to the future and be consciously aware of those moments, but then to say, hey, like, well, what about this moment, right? Mm-hmm. Recognizing this time and the here and the now, but then the now is constantly everlasting, right? It's now, then now, then now, then now. And then so then you look at fish and other creatures and birds and like all these other entities that also live here too. It's like, do they also have this level of awareness?
Right.
Do they? Right. And do they communicate like we do? Or do they communicate at a greater scale or a different scale, right? Because again, we are, right now we're opening up a huge can of worms. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, huge can of worms.
What is life?
Because, trees communicate through the fungal network in the ground, right? And then birds communicate and bees communicate through the wings and the vibrations that they actually generate. So like, for instance, for every 1 meter of tree root, there's about like close to 3 meters of fungi network or mycelium that the trees use in a symbiotic relationship of sugar and water to actually send vibrations to another tree to say, hey, I'm feeling good or I'm not feeling good. Whoa. Help me out, right? So they'll actually send other nutrients to another tree if it's sick, right? Or other trees know that it is sick, right? Versus like bees actually have a vibration in their wings unlike any other creature. And because of this vibration, it can actually notify bees like miles away to let it know that, hey, we're over here, come hang out, right? So it's like these little things in awareness. But the reason why I brought this up was like understanding how can we reconnect ourselves to our consciousness. And no one again knows if it's in our brain, if it's in our heart, if it's in our body, or if it's all around us, right? And what's all around us? Air. And so we breathe and it feels good, right? And the only time that our brain consciously tells us to breathe is through yawning. And yeah, so like, yeah, about yawning, it's a really interesting thing because we think it's because we're tired, but it's not that at all. It's like whenever your car is working very hard and it kicks the fan on, right? It's when your brain is like thinking about something or working through something really hard and you're like, like it needs more air, like, and just...
I just had so many epiphanies. Okay.
Okay, yes, please share.
Well, no, that's just crazy because I had this... okay, this is gonna be a thing, but with everything going on in the world in the pandemic, and like we've heard this like narrative like of like I can't breathe like so often, and I've struggled with mental health in the past, and to some degree I think it is still present at some points, and with anxiety, I didn't even realize that I was having like a prolonged anxiety attack for like 2 weeks straight, and I like couldn't breathe, and I wasn't sick, I got tested, but like it was so weird. Like I felt like I like couldn't breathe, and I like kept yawning. I kept like that was like my brain was focusing so hard on like trying to breathe that I was like I kept yawning and like and I was yawning like every day, and I like wasn't tired, like I wasn't anything, and I was like so confused about that. But now I'm just like realizing why that happened, and to conclude that story so that I don't leave anyone else feeling anxiety, I basically was able to like heal through that with understanding it was coming from like emotions that had come up, and also like the alignment of your body and the breath, and I got chiropractic adjusted, and that helped significantly, and just clearing the channel. It was because of like certain traumas that had come up that I hadn't felt through yet, and so I needed to like feel through them and release them and cry, and my breathing returned to normal and everything's fine. And it's just so crazy though that like that's a thing that like when we like the breath is the center of everything, and so like when that happens, like yeah, I was yawning all the time, so that was a little divergence, but yeah, that's so crazy.
Yeah,
that makes sense though. Like the brain's like gasping for air almost.
Yeah, and if we don't like again do it, one, we're not gonna survive, but two, it's like you're learning that it's a conduit again for allowing emotions to move through us. Because a lot of times if it gets stuck from traumas or past, like, and if we don't like share it vocally, we don't move it out of our body, or like you had chiropractic adjustment, it was allowing the body to reorganize itself by knowing where it needed to be, right? And so if you feel certain blocks or certain tensions, whether through a massage or through dance or through some kind of interactive activity and experience that allows the body to realign, because again, our body grew all of this.
Yes.
Our fingers, our feet, like all of this. And so then it just means that it also has the innate wisdom within it to reorganize itself, right? And find the harmony and unity for it to be in the state that it needs to be in. But the moment that we're out of alignment and out of ease, you know, we're in a state of dis-ease, right? And that state causes our body to consume things and to experience things, and again, not be aware of certain emotions that we're bringing into ourselves. And so learning to realign and reconnect those centers in our body, and then allowing ourselves to show up for people so they can see more of themselves through us.
Yeah. I think that's something that all humans struggle with at some point, is that like feeling out of alignment and not knowing what to do and not knowing where to go, and you just like lose that clarity in those states. And there's so many tools to like shift that, and it's so powerful in my own personal journey, seeing how my body and mind have transformed, in other people's journeys, seeing how, I mean, your body completely transformed through your journey, and like it's just so powerful, like the ability we have to like just connect to that. Like our bodies know what they're doing, and connecting to our intuition, which I think is like even more clear when our channel is clear and when we're in alignment. But
yeah, and that's a big one too, because then it's like, well, what is intuition? You know, where do you feel it? Like, is it in your head? Is it in my stomach? Is it in my heart? Right? And that's a great question. I definitely don't know. But reconnecting, taking time to be that clear system, that clear channel, to show up and be like, okay, what feels good to me? What do I need to do? Instead of overthinking it, because when you think, you're just using your neocortex, and you're allowing your, you know, system to be overanalyzing, overthinking, like what's right, what's wrong, and you're using your black and white conditions to judge. Versus then how can you just slow down, create the space, breathe, and slow down to see, okay, act, show, be this, instead of thinking that you need to be something you're not.
Right. And finding the like answers within ourselves rather than like any like logical solution, or I don't know, like the thinking brain of, that was our last podcast episode too, was talking about the brain and like which areas of the brain, and we can actually like through meditation shift from the like thinking brain to like the conscious brain, the like subconscious like programmed brain to like the conscious brain and the prefrontal cortex, I think, Jessica. Like shifting to that conscious brain and Like, I know for me, like when I need to make a decision or when I'm confused about something, like usually there's like meditation involved or breath work or dance or shaking or anything. But then like it all comes down to like, I usually will like put my hands on like my gut or like put my hands on my heart and like tap into those feelings within myself rather than like the logical program brain being like the logical next step is this. Like I usually just, I don't get to the best answers that way. And
yeah,
that makes sense why, if we're just like thinking constantly.
Yeah, and going full circle now, it's like that left and right brain part of our body. It's like our society doesn't really support both. It wants us to choose one side.
Right.
It's like, yeah, and it tells us to sit a certain way or walk a certain way or stand a certain way or even dress a certain way. And it's like, well, does that mean that's right for everyone?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
But what I know is what feels best for me and what feels best for you. And whatever that is, it's like honoring that and not necessarily, you know, again, not being afraid that you can show up as your fullest expression or how you want to show up and be in the world, right? Because the moment that you're, again, choosing something, you're wearing your button-ups or you're wearing a certain tie or an outfit that doesn't feel good to you, you know, that makes you feel closed off, then you're out of alignment. And then you're in a state of disease, you know, and not in a state of like the most optimal version of you. So now, again, your immune system's jeopardized because you're not happy. Right? And you're not feeling those good states of emotions because you're not empowered. You're not feeling safe or secure because you're like trying to be something that your environment's telling you to be. Right?
Right.
But then the greater question is like, how do I change that? How?
Right.
Right? But the first choice is to be aware of it and then see the value behind why you want to change it. You know? So.
And like what makes me feel best? Because like all humans are different and that's what makes us all beautiful. It's like this world would be boring as fuck if we were all like the exact same person and preferred the same things and preferred the same clothes, and like that's our individuality and that's like our innate wisdom within every single one of us to like connect to that part of ourselves and connect to what feels best for us, what feels best for me is the question that I feel like all of us should ask ourselves more often. But yeah. Amazing. Well, we'll end on the final question. What, in your mind, makes someone a happy human, and what would your advice be for someone who wants to become more of a happy human in this lifetime?
Yeah. It's a really good question. What makes a happy human? I find it kind of comes back to many points that we shared today. You know, and again, thank you all for tuning in. And the happy human is a sense of connection to yourself and honoring what loving yourself means, right? What brings you most joy, what makes you feel safe, what makes you feel seen or heard. But taking time to connect with that, taking time to ask yourself, it's time for me to be happy. It's my choice, and it always has been. But now I realize that it's always been my choice, and then being gentle. So how? First, wanting to be happy.
Right.
Two, being gentle with the self to say, hey, it's okay that I wasn't before.
Yeah.
And third, now I will always choose myself first and love myself first. Because I have to before I can do it for someone else.
Right. Yes. That's incredible. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. To stay connected with Kevin, make sure to follow him on Instagram at Kevin's Roots. And to connect with the amazing Habitual Roots community, follow them at Habitual Roots on Instagram. And you can stay in the loop with their mindful meetups and events on the Meetup platform. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and we would love to connect with you more. Reviews on Apple Podcasts are always very much appreciated so we can hear your feedback. And if you enjoyed this episode, we would love to know your biggest takeaways. Share it to your Instagram story and make sure to tag us at Happy Humans Project on Instagram so we can connect more with you there and plug you into the Happy Humans community.